idea, Michelle.
No problem.
Thank you. So yeah, we are also getting storms out in Albany too. I think it's sort of like a New York State thing. Everybody's just getting clobbered today with rain and storms. But anyway, I'm Jennifer Wilson. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm the Deputy Director for the New York State League, also member of the Albany County League. So welcome everyone. Thank you for being on. I realized after we sort of put this together, we sort of gave the vague headline of talking about redistricting and the People Powered Fair Maps campaign, and then seeing that we had about 40 people registered. I thought I would just quickly, before starting with sort of my idea for this, is kind of like a recap of the campaign, updates on what we've done so far, a sort of report out on some of the impact we've had so far, and then finishing off with hopefully like a half hour or more of people on this Zoom sharing out what their league is doing on redistricting. And of course, feel free to drop your names and local leagues in the chat. That's always great to see who's on the call for me and for everybody else on the call. But just really quickly, just in case anyone here is their first time sort of talking about redistricting with us, if you all wouldn't mind doing a quick poll on how familiar you are with the New York State redistricting process. Are you very familiar? Are you just a little bit familiar? Or have you do not know anything, not familiar at all? Just so I can see if we need a quick redistricting 101 to kind of start us off, or if we're okay to kind of jump into the work that's already being done. So 20 something seconds left. How many seconds is left? We'll see. We got 95. We got 100% voted. Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna end the poll. And it looks like most people are somewhat familiar, which is good. So I will do just a couple of slides of like redistricting 101. I am gonna have to jump back and forth between PowerPoints because I separated out, but that's fine. It's no problem. I want to make sure that people are up to speed on what's going on. So I am going to share my screen and do the first set of slides that are more about what the campaign is that the league is working on and kind of a catch up of what's been going on with that. So here we go. Just make sure about all my participants in here. Awesome. Okay. Finally. Okay. So just again, the quick agenda is sort of what is the People Powered Fair Maps campaign? How has the league, the New York State League, been working on this campaign? What are some of the outcomes we've had so far through our campaign work? What are we going to do next? And then a share out of everyone, kind of like an open conversation of what are you doing on redistricting? What's your local league doing? Do you have feedback? Any sort of thing like that, kind of like an open session, if you will. So to get started, for anyone who's never heard the term People Powered Fair Maps campaign, this is a national-led effort. National last year encouraged all 50 states and the District of Columbia to embark in what they're calling the People Powered Fair Maps campaign, which is essentially seeking to improve our redistricting process, either by improving the process itself, by having an independent commission do redistricting, or by influencing the process, the legislative or commission-led process, or completely fixing the system altogether. So either the influence of sort of like testifying at hearings, participating in sort of open meetings that are going to happen, or changing the process itself through a legislative or ballot referendum so that states could have a more open redistricting process. And I'm going to quickly actually jump to my other slides because I think it's sort of relevant for the few of you who aren't super familiar to kind of see what that process looks like in New York State. And I promise I'll be brief but succinct with this. I don't want anyone to be like totally out of the loop. And you'll notice the slides are extremely similar because I just copied and pasted my slide deck. But kind of jumping ahead for a second, I think we all know what redistricting is. This is something that happens around the census every 10 years. We have to make sure that our districts are proportionately similar so that voters don't have greater representation in one district versus another district. We don't want there to be less voters in one district or another. We don't want to have cracking and packing, which I have slides on as well. We don't want our people to be gerrymandered in their districts. So the way that New York State does things is we previously had a legislative task force who drew our lines, which was a very, very partisan way of doing redistricting. It was controlled by our Senate and Assembly, by sitting legislators. They would write their own lines. At the time, the Senate was controlled by Republicans. The House, the Assembly was controlled by Democrats, and it was a very easy way for them to kind of come together and basically draw lines that were going to hold their seats so that there would be very little competition. There'd be very little opportunity for a candidate of the other party to have any sort of opportunity to win a race. And it was basically great for them. So in 2014, we worked to amend this process through I'm just going to skip over the gerrymandering because I know League people know gerrymandering, I feel like, very well. But we had a ballot referendum to basically change our process so that instead of allowing the sitting legislature to draw their own lines, a commission will now be able to draw the lines instead. This is the first time we're going to have the commission, the Independent Redistricting Commission, draft our lines, because this happened in 2014, this constitutional amendment. But essentially what this amendment does is it sets deadlines, it mandates transparency, it mandates a minimum number of hearings, and it ensures that people actually have a say in the process instead of the incumbent legislature just doing whatever they want with little to no public input. So here's just a comparison of what we had before, where it was the Senate majority, Assembly majority basically in control. Now it's a 10-member commission, equal appointments from both parties, equal appointments from both levels of government, plus 2 additional appointees that are not supposed to be a member of either of the major parties. Again, more strict rules. They can't have been a member of the New York State legislature or Congress within the last 3 years. They can't be a lobbyist. They can't be a legislative employee or a state employee or officer. They can't be a political party chairman or be the spouse of any one of those people. And this also is important because they wanted to make sure that there was representation of all the people of New York State in this process as well. So the Constitution mandates that there be diversity of gender, race, ethnicity, language, and geographic reference so that the people drawing the lines for New York State look like the people of New York State and not all white men, basically. So here's a quick look at the appointments, the 10 appointments. Actually, one of them just at their last meeting was resigning, and I can't for the life of me remember who it is, but it's one of the Senate minority appointments. I think it's George Winter is resigning, so there will be a vacancy, but this is kind of what we're looking like. As you can see, we have pretty decent geographic distribution, but we really think it could have been improved. There's only 2 women on the commission. That was something the league fought for, was greater diversity in gender. And we also partnered with Latino Justice and Naleo Educational Fund about having Latinx representation, because originally with the first 8 appointments, there was no Latinx representation. There is now. Cuevas Kalina Molina is our Latina nominee, which was who Latino Justice and Naleo recommended. So we're very happy to get her to be the commissioner. But this is just a quick sort of lay of the land of who the commissioners are. Now we can go back to the other PowerPoint, because I feel like that's the quick and dirty of sort of what the process is like. And now we'll dig a little bit more into the timeline at the end of this, but that's just sort of the basic 10-member commission. The commission is going to meet. They have been having meetings about once or twice a month. They're starting to pick up now that they've got funding. So now we can sort of dig into a little bit more how the league is interacting in all of this. So I apologize for like the craziness of this, but I do want to make sure everyone is sort of on the same page with what is redistricting in New York State. So how are we engaging in this campaign? We have been engaging in our people-powered Fair Maps campaign and in fair redistricting in 4 different ways. We're working to educate the public. We're working to build partnerships with diverse stakeholder groups, particularly groups that the league has not worked with in the past in this intimate way. We're also looking to engage communities and community mapping with a focus on communities of interest and keeping those communities together and having them best represented in a way that's going to serve their needs. and we're advocating for fair maps. So we're participating in the process. We'll be preparing, helping people get prepared for the hearings that will be coming up soon, and all of the important things that are going to happen now that the commission is finally fully formed and funded. So we're also going to be engaging in weighing in on the maps, encouraging our local league chapters to participate in some of these hearings, and not just at the state level with state assembly and senate and congress, but also at the local level as well, giving local leagues the opportunity to sort of see what's going to best fit their capacity in terms of participating in this, but also working with community members to help them get familiar with some of the map drawing software that's out there, that's brand new from 10 years ago, that's totally free and very easy to access now that most people have home laptops, computers that they can even take around with them. So helping people to understand how they can participate in community mapping as individuals and as a community. We are also working to encourage our local chapters to participate in this in a really meaningful way by identifying local league delegates. We have met with, I think, all 46 of our chapters in some way or another on redistricting, have identified local league delegates in all of those areas, and have pinpointed regional contacts in each of these areas for different organizations that local league chapters can reach out to do some of this redistricting work with, to sort of make the connection of it benefits us both to be working on redistricting. All you organizations are going to be working on this anyway. Let's work together. We have materials, we have education materials. We're ready to help the people in your community learn about redistricting and how they can get involved. So how are we measuring our success? So our education, advocacy, and outreach are sort of the three pillars of this. And recently I went back and decided to kind of see what are our results. We've been working on this since last year, sort of building relationships since last year, but I would say the meat of the campaign really started in January. That's when we took the relationships that we formed in 2020 around the census and around getting the commission up and running back in February of 2020, and some of the work that we did through other coalitions, and sort of brought it to the forefront in January and really launched the campaign in January. So since then, we have had 4 events as well as 1 mapping software training. And this graph here shows the increase in attendance at our different events. So we had our campaign kickoff back in January. We had a panel discussion with 3 expert panelists and lawyers talking about meeting the challenges of community engagement in this redistricting cycle for New York State, since it is very different. We had an engaging communities of interest training where we trained local league leaders how to identify their own community of interest, and then how to help the people in their community identify their communities of interest, because most people have multiple communities of interest. I might have my church group that's my community of interest, where we all go to church here and we fundraise here and we have our after church meal here. But then I also might have my kids' school as part of my community of interest, and my kids all go to school here. They're all in the sports team here. They all take the school bus here. I drive on this road to drop them off here. So most people have many, many communities of interest to consider with redistricting. And finally, we had our most successful event, our People's Hearing, which was on the National Day of Action on April 29th, where we invited 22 organizations, including local league chapters, to come and have a virtual sort of mock hearing of what redistricting means to them and the communities that they serve and represent. At this point, there has not been any opportunity for public engagement with the Redistricting Commission because they only just got their funding. They're just starting to hire staff. And it's been really frustrating for groups like the League to have no way to even talk to them. I mean, I talked to them on their private Gmail accounts, which is totally crazy, but there's no way to really connect with them. There's no website. Even their public meetings aren't recorded because they're on the Senate's website. So there's just this total lack of communication between the commission and the public. So we wanted to have sort of a mock hearing to get people ready, to get them thinking about what are the issues going to be surrounding redistricting and how can communities get involved in redistricting. And we had 325 people on the physical event with us, and then we had 750 people watching it on Facebook. So in total, we've had about 2,000 people between our live streams and our archive streams and our actual in-person viewers on our webinars. And then even more than that, we've had about 100,000 people on our social media, Facebook and Twitter, interact with us on redistricting, sharing our posts, commenting on our posts, um, liking our posts, I guess you could say. We've had 100,000 people engage with us on those two platforms, which is really exciting because it's a way to say these are 100,000 people that have been impacted by the work that we're doing and the joint work that we're doing. So in addition to our social media, we've really taken advantage of our website, nyredistricting.org. We have about 37 educational resources on there. We have 10 specific community mapping resources. Those are free mapping software programs plus different trainings that are available for free. The 8 free mapping software tools. We have our 4 educational videos that are our Redistricting 101, our community engagement training, our panel, and our people's hearing. And we just have a lot of materials on there and links to other organizations' websites about redistricting. So really it's a one-stop shop of redistricting information, which is really awesome. In terms of advocacy, you may remember that one of our big budget items was funding for the Independent Redistricting Commission. And you might also remember that back in January and February of this year, there was a lot of talk of how the commission wasn't being funded. They hadn't received their money. They were supposed to get $1 million in 2020, and the money never got paid out. And then they were saying that the state was telling them that it was going to be paid out through a different agency, and the agency was going to keep part of the money for themselves. They weren't even going to get the full 1 million they were promised. They were only going to get about 625,000. And we basically said that's not acceptable. And we partnered with 35 different organizations, or 30 plus, I said, but it's about 35. We partnered with about 35 organizations. This is just a sampling of some of the groups that we worked with on this slide, some of their logos, to basically say that's unacceptable, that's not enough money, this money needs to be independent, it needs to be paid out immediately so the commission can get to work. And through the state budget process in February, March, and part of April, we had 14 calls to action, about 10,000 social media engagements, 5 joint organizational actions, which included joint letters that we signed with these organizations. We drafted, spearheaded that, and signed, as well as joint testimony that we drafted on behalf of our organizational partners, and then also different social media organizational actions as well. And the league really took the lead on all these initiatives, but in spite of taking the lead, we always wanted the organization's feedback. We always would be the first to draft, but then to send off and say, give us edits, give us critiques, how can we improve this? What do you think? You know, we always wanted feedback. A lot of these organizations are national organizations where they are doing redistricting in all 50 states, but their office is in New York, and New York is sort of a not as important state in a lot of ways because there are other states that are having much worse of a time with redistricting, or they're state organizations, but redistricting is not their focus. So it gave the league the opportunity to be the point person on this, so that organizations who care about redistricting in New York State, but don't have the man or woman power to make it their priority, can rely on us to give them nonpartisan, up-to-date information on what was going on, and then to bring them in to have them work with us on these joint actions. So not to toot our own horn, but we really have been a major voice in redistricting, but not as far as taking over and telling organizations that our way is the only way to do it, more of a collaborative partner to say, hey, let's work together. If you want to work together, we're doing this. We think it would be great for you to do it with us, and have built that trust through the census, through the sort of earlier part of redistricting in the latter part of 2020, and now have these great relationships. And through all of these actions, we secured $4 million for the Independent Redistricting Commission, which was $2 million more than they were originally expected to get. Originally, they were going to get the $1 million, then they were going to get $2 million, and then finally we got the $4 million. So plenty of money to actually get the work done that they need to get done. So moving ahead to measuring our success and outreach, we had an intern help us to do some local stakeholder group identification. And in total, our intern identified 375 357 local stakeholder groups. Basically, we asked our redistricting intern to sort of look in all of the regions of the state where we have local leagues and find organizations that we believe would have interest in redistricting, that we believe represent a community of interest, essentially. So be it food banks, churches, different local organizations that provide services. We basically told her just like think outside the box and identify organizations. And she went through and identified these groups, and we were able to provide to our local leagues the names of the groups, the email addresses, in some case, a contact for the different groups, the website of the groups, the address of the groups, and a short description of what the group is and who the group represents, so that local leagues wanting to take part in this had sort of a starting point to think outside of their regular groups that they might be working with. Like I said, we also had 35 statewide partners, and our 46 local chapters were engaged, and we have 79 local league delegates. I just said volunteers on the slide, but we're calling them delegates, our local league delegates, which for me is so exciting that there's 79 people around the state interested in this. I just think it's so great because it is kind of a dry topic, to be honest. So just to sort of go back to the diversity of partners engaged, if you look at this slide, you might yourself maybe not even recognize some of these groups, or you might recognize them and think to yourself, oh, the leagues never worked with them before. And you're right. Other than the New York Civil Liberties Union and Citizens Union, most of the groups on this slide had never been a partner with the League of Women Voters, and now looks to the league as a trusted ally in redistricting. And we're very excited to move these relationships forward beyond redistricting. Redistricting has definitely been an excellent opportunity to expand our horizons, and the groups that we are in contact with, these groups are now sharing the social media posts that we've been putting out there on their social media. They're sharing our events on their social media. They're excited to partner with us. They're looking forward to partnering with us more in redistricting. So I think that this sort of cohort of groups, we're not a formal coalition, it's more of sort of like a cohort of groups, is going to be working together really, really closely between now and the maps actually being put forward in January. And then just a quick slide on press outreach. We have been working really hard with press outreach as well. Definitely a harder sell redistricting. I think it's going to get easier as we get closer to the actual redistricting cycle, but it's been a hard sell, but we have done some good traditional press in addition to all of the other things that we're doing. So what's next? So I'm almost done talking. What's next? Just to sort of like catch us up on where we are in the process, our sort of "you are here" slide. If you look here, this is the calendar that I keep continuously updating for each of these presentations. And now we are at the big giant block in the middle, the June, July, August tentative hearing dates. The commission has been hiring their staff. They have all of their staff positions listed on a couple of different job posting sites. And I have heard that they are starting to interview candidates already, which is great. Originally, they had hoped to have their first hearing as early as June. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's much more likely it will be in late July, early August. You know, hiring staff is not an overnight thing. I think it's going to take a little longer than they anticipate. They are mandated to have the public hearings listed here in Albany, Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester, White Plains, Bronx, Kings County, New York County, Richmond County, Queens County, Nassau County, and Suffolk County. And they have also said they're planning to also have another Southern tier hearing and a North Country hearing as well, which is great. They have said that they may do them in person or they may do them virtually. So it's a lot of stuff up in the air, basically. It's a lot of moving parts. It's hard to say exactly when the hearings will happen or the manner in which the hearings will happen, but at least the commission is now funded and we have a better sense of how they're going to be moving forward. And then some of the hard dates on here, the September map is due September, or the public map rather, is due September 15th for review. There also potential and most likely will be a second round of hearings in the fall. So think like September, November, or October, November, so October, November. And then they have to have their plans to the legislature by January 1st for the legislature to start reviewing them and voting on them. And this, just as a quick aside for the few of you who were not super familiar with the redistricting process in New York State, The commission will put forward the maps for the legislature to approve or deny. If the legislature disapproves the first set of maps, then the commission itself can go back and make changes and then re-put those maps forward. They have to do that before the end of February. They have to be notified before the end of February, and then they have to redo their maps, and then the legislature gets the opportunity to vote on them again. If the legislature still doesn't like them, the legislature has the opportunity to draft their own maps based on what the commission has put forward, and following the rules that are part of the Constitution in terms of how the map should be looking, that they should be contiguous, that their population density should be similar, all of those rules they have to follow. So what are we going to do between now and then? We are planning to do some training on writing and presenting testimonies, probably shortly after this convention, to be honest with you, probably sometime in like late June, we'll be having those. We'll probably do multiple rounds of those. The League of Women Voters of Washington State has a very excellent presentation that they've done in the past on how to help people, just a regular person, write and prepare testimonies specifically about redistricting. So we'll just be adapting on that. So the presentation's ready. We just need to put a date on the calendar. We'll expect those hearings to happen in late summer. And then we'll also start to get on the calendar some more mapping software trainings for the public and for league members, so that if people want to take advantage of these different programs that are out there, they'll have the opportunity to do that through us, or we'll continue, or I should say, we'll continue to promote the trainings that the companies themselves are having on these mapping software, these different mapping software. So we'll be promoting their trainings and also hosting some of our own. So now I am really going to shut up because I'm tired of talking. And I'm also very curious to hear from everyone on here. And I see Gail Volk already has her hand up, but before I turn over to Gail for a question or comment, the idea here is that I think raised hand is probably the easiest, or if you don't want to like physically share out, if you want to drop in the chat what your league is working on, or what your league is planning to work on, or just like general sort of comments on redistricting, please do so in the chat. And with that, Gail, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm trying to unraise my hand and talk at the same time, which I can't do. I wanted to ask you about the slide that you had that was very impressive, about all the outreach that the State League has been doing, and the advocacy piece. I was wondering if in all of those bubbles, were you also taking into account all of the things that we were doing at the local level to meet with our legislators? And that was part of, you know, the numbers of all these, what is it, 100,000 individuals? Was that including what we were doing?
So it was including in the sense that anytime any of your local league members interacted with our social posts, then it was included in that 100,000 number. And it was including the meetings that were held and reported back on the funding for the commission, which I think we had in total like 35 meetings that were held by local league chapters. And then we at the State League office had some additional like sort of internal meetings too. So yes, in some respects, in many respects, yes, it is a combination of efforts, I would say, of the State League and the local leagues as well.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone want to share out about what their local league is doing or planning on doing, or?
I can share, Jen, but I can't find my raised hand now that I'm co-host. I'm looking for it. So Michelle Lamberti with Port Washington, Manhasset on Long Island and the Nassau County ILO. And I see a lot of people. So in Nassau County, we actually decided to have all of our leagues work together. So I see a lot of people from the Nassau County crew that are on here tonight, which is great. We came up with a really large list of possible partners. I think we have like 80 community organizations. So we're still in the process of reaching out to them. And I think it's been great. I want to say we've probably reached at least like 30. I'd say 10 are probably pretty interested. Some are not, it's not really on their radar right now. So our next, the next push, once we get through all of them, will really be, I think, to do education first. We've been struggling a little bit with the timing of, because for us in NASA, we're going to do, this year we'll work on the state lines and congressional lines. But for next year, we're also really planning on working on the Nassau County lines, the county legislature and the town and city lines. So it's really figuring out kind of how to keep people excited through the whole process, and like, do we do education this summer and then we'll do it again. So we will plan to do educational meetings. We're thinking about doing the libraries probably first and focusing on areas where redistricting has the most disparate impact. So like where I live, for example, is on a peninsula. We're very rarely cut up. But there are other areas, particularly areas where there are a lot of people of color, the middle of the island, and even the South Shore, that are really sliced and diced. So education, and then it'll be, we've had some interest from groups who want to get more involved in advocacy. And for those, we'll do partnership around testimony mapping and those kind of things. But a question more for you, Jen, that I probably should have asked before is, we're also thinking about the fall. So for November, we'll have to do a lot of education about the changes to the Constitution that will be on the ballot. So with particular focus on this call, on the redistricting one, encouraging people to vote against that. So that'll be like a whole other education piece. Unsure what the state's going to do around that. And I had a question about a bill that's in the Senate by Senator Skoufis, who's like, I guess he's focusing on putting in place some parameters for redistricting at the county levels. So just didn't know if you knew anything about that or kind of what's going on. I know some of the Long Island Democratic senators at least are co-sponsors. I haven't reached out to their offices yet, but to see what the lay of the land might be in that area as well.
Yeah, and the Skoufis, and I think it's an Amy Paulin bill on the assembly side too. It's one that I do believe we would be supportive, since we've been supportive of other reforms from Amy Paulin on reforming the county level of redistricting in New York State and making it more uniform. And I think that specific one is mainly about population density within districts, so that population sizes are comparable, so that districts within counties aren't totally skewed. To be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to dig super deep into the bill because of convention, but I think it's one that's going to pass. And on first brush, it does look like a good bill. Amy Paulin had another bill that we really liked about reforming county level redistricting that didn't move this year. So that was kind of mandating counties have a sort of similar structure to the state, where it's, it says they should be contiguous. It says that they should not be breaking up political subdivisions or anything like that, but it didn't move this year. So this sounds like at least a good sort of bill that the membership can agree on. On your second question about the constitutional amendment, I want to give some background for anybody on here who isn't familiar with this amendment that was put forward last year, passed, and then put forward again this year and passed, which is going to amend the redistricting process in New York State, our commission structure, to change the voting structure so that instead of mandating a 2/3, or I'm sorry, instead of mandating that when both houses in the Senate and Assembly are controlled by the same party, that in the commission's voting on the maps for approval, there has to be minority appointee input. It's going to change it so that a simple majority vote will allow the independent redistricting commission to move their map, so that they don't need third party input and they don't need minority party input, in this case, Republican input. And then for the legislative side of things, again, if there's control by the same party in both houses, currently the voting structure is they need a 2/3 vote in the legislature to approve the maps that are put forward by the commission. This amendment is going to change it, so they just need a simple majority to approve maps. So again, taking away the minority party's influence in the voting process on the maps, and essentially allowing one party to just control the entire process. The amendment does some other things too. I always want to be transparent about this because it does do good things. It takes out all this dead language in the Constitution referring to aliens. It also puts into the Constitution the mandate that people who are incarcerated be reappropriated back to their last address, which is state law. It's not the Constitution, but it is the law. So it puts that in the Constitution just to make it totally clear, no question. And then it also changes the timeline for approving maps, because currently, since we moved our primaries, we are going to be starting our petitioning process potentially for these seats, the Senate and Assembly seats, in February, when they may be voting on these maps should the first set of maps be denied. So there's the potential that there will not be seats for candidates that they will be petitioning for. There won't be any districts, and they'll be petitioning for districts that don't exist. So it does change the timeline. It wouldn't impact this year, even if it is voted on by the voters to pass for this year. It won't take effect this year. So it's going to be a problem either way this time around, but for next time around, it'll be a fix. The league is very opposed to this amendment because it takes away any sort of minority party input in this process, which is why we supported the initial amendment in the first place. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than what we had before. And when I say minority party, I always feel like New York State people think minority party equals Republican, but I'm really talking about Green Party voters, Working Family Parties voters, Conservative Party voters, yes, Republican voters, but also unaffiliated voters are not going to have a say. And if we total up all those voting populations, it's an equal number of all those people in Democrats. So it's sort of like half of our state voting population is going to have zero representation into this process that's going to impact their daily lives. So yes, we will be doing some campaigning around education for that ballot proposal. And we will, of course, as we always do with ballot proposals, we always say what the league's position is. So on that particular one, we will say we are opposed. There's going to be 5 ballot proposals, actually, just as like sort of aside. There's going to be 5 of them. So there is that one. There are the 2 voting ballot constitutional amendment ballot proposals. So same day voter registration and no excuse absentee voting. There is also the Clean Air and Water Amendment, and there is also a bond act, a water bond. I just was writing this down earlier today. An environmental bond act. Yeah, just an environmental bond act that deals specifically with flood risk reduction, land conservancy, and water quality infrastructure, which is super important. So we're supporting all of the ballot proposals except the constitutional, or except the redistricting one. They're all constitutional except the bond act. But anyway, if anyone else has questions too on any of those things, I'm happy to respond to those.
Jennifer, you're putting all of that stuff in writing. Some
yeah. Oh yeah.
I know we talked about it before. I should just talk a little bit about what Albany County is doing. With we've been working with Rensselaer County most closely, and with the One Person, One Vote Coalition on a regular basis. One Person, One Vote Coalition includes a number of people from the Urban League and some other organizations in the area. And we did a joint testimony at the People's hearing that was presented through the One Person, One Vote Coalition. So it was not the League of Albany or Rensselaer County. We did it that way. And we also have been meeting weekly with Saratoga to put together a campaign that would be an educational campaign. And I think we're going to, on the League side, be really leading on the educational piece. It's still kind of fluid and we're working out the details, but that also working with the One Person, One Vote Coalition more on the mapping part and working with the communities of interest. So we're doing lots and lots of meetings, and we did do some interviews, some with some local media, and a lot of social media is what we've been starting to do. So that's it, lots going on.
Dolores, I saw you were going to speak. Did you have a question or a comment?
I was wondering, with the commission, are there rules about how, I mean, do they vote on a particular map at the end, or how do they make a decision about what is being put to the legislature?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So with the current, this new structure, yes, they will vote on a bunch of different maps, essentially. So they'll have the opportunity to draft their own maps. They'll have their own opportunity to sort of draft maps collectively. Most likely what we've heard is that they're going to hire a consultant to draft them some different versions of maps. And then the map that gets the highest number of votes is the one that will go to the legislature. And there'll be multiple maps, of course, because there'll be a congressional map, there'll be a New York State Senate map, and there'll be a New York State Assembly map. So they'll have a couple of different maps that'll sort of be in the mix. And whichever one is the highest vote getter is the one that'll go to the legislature to be voted upon.
Thank you.
Is there anybody on from Rochester? Rochester is doing some super exciting redistricting stuff.
I confess, I'm from Rochester. But you probably know more about what we're doing here than I do. I've been into other different directions and I haven't really kept up with it other than, you know, tangentially. So you tell us what Rochester's doing.
Okay, I'm happy to tell you guys what Rochester's doing. Rochester is working on some different partnerships. They have a committee working on redistricting, which I believe is about 6 different members working on it who have been meeting once or twice a month to sort of talk about what their plans are. And their plans are to essentially do different email blasts to people within their community. So to build an email list in conjunction with different organizations, libraries, and then different groups within the community, and then to send out email blasts informing people of redistricting. So sort of an educational piece, as well as a follow-up when hearings are coming up and keeping people involved with the different opportunities to get involved in the process. And they're also doing sort of cold call emails as well to different organizations, inviting them to work on redistricting with them, either through just an educational lens or through a community mapping lens. And they are just getting started, but they are very excited, and I'm excited to see what Rochester does. So yeah, and also Syracuse as well is getting started and has a committee in place. I don't know if anybody's on from Syracuse that would want to speak to what they're doing, but it's very nice that we have such a wide breadth of, of different areas of the state that we cover. So Arlene.
I have to unmute. She has to unmute.
Hold on, okay.
There you go.
Yes, I wanted to ask, since New York State is losing a congressional district, okay, where do we think that loss is coming from? I think I read something about it, but then I forgot where it was.
Yeah, so in the Western New York area,
Oh,
Tom Collins? No, what is his name? Oh my gosh. Is it Collins? Am I going crazy?
Chris Collins?
It's Collins, right? Yeah, okay. There's a member who's resigning in Western New York. He's not running again. And it's predicted that that will be the seat that will be lost. But even if a different seat is lost, everyone's district is going to look really, 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 really different, because even though we're losing a seat, New York State's population increased. So now, especially in the rural parts of the state where there's less people per square mile, districts are going to get a lot bigger upstate. They might get a lot smaller downstate, where a lot of people have moved into New York City or moved out of New York City. So everyone's district is going to be extremely, extremely different this time around, just because, yes, we're losing the seat, and also our population is bigger than it was before. So we've got one less seat and more people. So it's gonna be really different. Tom Reed, yes, thank you, Gail. Why was Collins
You were
in my
thinking
head?
of you were thinking of Chris Collins.
I'm sorry. Yes, Tom Reed.
okay, thank you.
One thing that disturbs me a little bit is having political people in political parties involved in this. seeing as both political parties, the Democrats, the Republicans, others have not that much power, have every time they are in power, they gerrymander. I mean, and it seems to me that we really don't need to hear from them. And I'm just wondering, if we could have some experts in other fields involved in this rather than so much party involvement. I mean, do we really know these people and they're absolutely committed to having having no political influence? And
Yeah,
that it should be a map for the people.
yeah. California is the state that often we say is sort of the model state. They have a citizen-led commission. So it's citizens who are selected to serve on their commission. They get support from the Department of State, who helps them get up and running, kind of see what their budget is, have an office space to meet and hire their staff and all of that. But the problem, I think, with redistricting is very similar to with elections, where the people in power don't want to change how the power structure works because then they have less power. So Margaret, I see your hand up.
Yeah, addressing that, I'm from Syracuse, Margaret Deal from, and last summer we supported, there was a big attempt to get an independent commission, redistricting commission, and we wanted to do it before the census because of course every 10 years then the winning party gets to draw the maps. So a Democratic legislator in the county ledge in Onondaga County came up with a proposal for an independent commission. And the idea was, well, what they had to do first was agree to put it on the ballot. So we really, from the league, we tried to educate and publicize and go to county ledge meetings. It was all on Zoom, of course. There was a sort of, I remember last summer, outside this legislator talked about it before they were going to vote, and we tried to get, for the pandemic it was a nice crowd, and so anyway, the county legislature, the Republicans, I think they're something like there are only 7 Democrats and something like 15 or 16 Republicans. Well, they voted it down. It wouldn't even come on the ballot. So that meant another 10 years that the Republicans will draw the district lines. And we tried to get out how very unfair this is. The Democrats never have a chance because there are so many Republicans who won't vote for it. And I guess this is all over. But we do have delegates now or representatives now going to the redistricting committee. And in fact, I did attend the training. So we're trying.
It isn't that, that every person who's involved in a party is determined to have gerrymandered districts, but the history doesn't fill us with a lot of confidence.
Well, it's just, there was this, it was very well thought out, this independent commission, but they voted along party lines. All the Republicans voted it down. This was just to put it on the ballot, and all the Democrats voted for it. So experience leaves us bitter.
I'm afraid so. Well, the league is involved in this, I think, all over the country, and each state has its own problems.
Yes.
We have to just concentrate on our state and what we need to see happen and just be out there as much as we can about it.
And Jennifer, I see Terry Parks put a question in the chat to ask us does the State League plan will we be doing any educational events related to the constitutional amendments this year?
Yeah, and thank you. I was gonna respond in chat and then I was spelling definitely wrong over and over and over. We haven't done any yet, but we are definitely going to do them come July and August and getting closer to the fall. The actual language for the ballot proposals probably won't get approved by the State Board of Elections until July or August. So we're going to wait until we have the actual referendum language before we start doing outreach on it. So that way we can make sure that what the voter is going to see is exactly what we're showing them and not different in any way. Is anyone on from Ulster or Orange counties? I know that Ulster got recently, within the last couple of years, their own independent redistricting commission, and Orange, I believe, is either on the way or currently. Oh, Dare. Okay, Dare.
We had Ulster 10 years ago, and I served on the commission and had the total joy of drawing the lines with some other people. We had some dark moments where some politically motivated people tried to screw up the system, but we prevailed and we got a standing ovation from the legislature. So it can be done. It helps if you're kind of split half and half, so it was definitely an opportunity. It also got written into the charter. We happen to have Jerry Benjamin, and not everybody has Jerry Benjamin, a good government person that gets attention. And he was in charge of the charter, writing of the charter, and they put it right into the charter. So we had a lot going to, and then they screwed up the building of a jail so badly that the public would have passed anything that was against the legislature. So we had all those things working for us. But then this year, Mark Molinaro is the county exec in Dutchess, and he's a Republican, and it's a Republican county pretty much. It's getting a little more purple. And it flew through committee and flew through the legislature, and there it is, and it's functioning beautifully. It's probably the most transparent one I've ever watched. And all I can say is I think Molinaro has a great future ahead of him, and he's building toward that, because I think you have to find an opportunity. Somebody's got to be needing something or hating somebody about something to get these things through. But watch for the opportunities, because I would never have guessed. I went over, when we had Ulster, I went over to Dutchess and spoke to the legislature and about this. They looked at me like I had two heads. Why would we do this? Oh my God, no, they didn't even get what the concept was. And then 10 years later, there it is, flying through. That's it. I mean, and I don't know anything about Orange. If that's happening, I have not heard it, and I read the paper.
No, I got my Orange and my Dutchess confused. Marguerite, did you? I thought I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say also to get redistricting through. What is very unfortunate is that many candidates run unopposed. And I think with these last few years, with people getting much more engaged in politics and realizing that they need to do this, they realize what happens when they don't. And so there is a group now, I think it's Flip 24, the district, they have really, people have really tried to get more candidates, good candidates to run. And so that incumbents are not unopposed. And so the push is to try to get more, to have the legislature more balanced, not just so lopsided as it is now. So that's what's going on here in our county.
It's
Go ahead, Gail.
questions are what Margaret was talking about is flip 24 because you're at the 24th Congressional District?
Yes, right.
Okay. Remind me where that is again? Syracuse, was it?
That's Syracuse, yes.
Thanks.
It's all very gerrymandered.
Gil, did you want to talk at all about how Albany got their independent commission?
I wish I could. I'm sorry, I was looking around. Patricia's not on and she has really the background knowledge. Sorry.
That's fair. I put you on the spot.
I could have prepared if I knew, but
No, that's okay. Is anybody else on from a county that's either working towards an independent commission or currently has an independent commission on redistricting?
We probably will, but I don't think we've started yet. That's Tompkins County.
And NASA will work on one, but it's a heavy lift. I know we tried last time, but we're gonna try again. And I think Arlene had her hand up.
Okay, I was just going to say, I was so impressed at the hearing that you had, that so many groups in like Queens and other parts of New York City where the Chinese vote or the Hispanic vote is divided up into 4 districts. I was so impressed with their testimony and their hopes that somehow they will get more representation. So that, I think, is something that our leagues should watch, right? I don't know what the New York City League is doing to watch that sort of thing, but I think that's a very difficult area, right, in the state to get fair maps for all those groups that came to the hearing.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because New York City is so densely populated and you're absolutely right, Arlene, it's hard. But on the other hand, they have much better resources than most upstate rural counties working on this. They have a huge unity mapping coalition that I think this is the 4th redistricting cycle that the coalition's going to work together. And it's spearheaded by the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. And they basically do what we're trying to replicate in the rest of the state, talking to community groups, talking to communities of interest and getting them interested in redistricting. And I had approached he's not the executive director. I forget exactly what his title is. I think he's like the voting rights expert and litigation expert attorney. And basically asked him, like, how can I do this upstate? And he essentially told me that it would take multiple cycles to do what they do in New York City upstate and have that level of collaboration and working together and putting aside differences for certain groups to have the best possible maps to recommend. So on the one hand, yes, New York City, it's a total other beast than the rest of the state. But on the other hand, they have lots of good support and resources that a lot of our upstate areas don't, unfortunately. Any other thoughts, comments, or anything? Hi, Patty.
Hey, hello, Patty. Jennifer, this is probably a dead question, but it goes along with another question someone asked. So we're losing a seat. And there was talk early on of suing or protesting or trying to change that. Did that go anywhere?
No, I had a conversation with a census and redistricting attorney who basically told me it was dead on arrival because in order for the suit to be viable, it would mean that every other state's results would also have to be identical. Like the other states' results could not change and only New York State's result could change in order for it to do anything. So I know it's so disappointing to be so close, but you know what? If you're on here and you're a league member who worked on the census, please don't feel defeated because remember we were going to lose 2 seats. And because of the work that was done around the census, we almost kept 2 seats. So I hate when people like understate that the great work of all the groups on getting out the count in New York State, because it's not easy in New York State.
Hey, good point. Good point. Thanks. Whatever. But thank you. Yes.
There's always next time. There's always next time.
Yes, exactly.
Good, Derek.
Your work with the different groups is so impressive. And where do you see all of us out here in local league land picking up on the work you've done? And, how can we maximize this? Do you have thoughts on that? I know you've addressed it a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what I think we're thinking about, kind of looking forward. And, we didn't get to talk about this in the DEI meeting last night because, or I don't know why, but from my perspective, it's not just redistricting. We've been trying to do this branch out work with our legislative work. It's voting really heavily as well, where we're trying to work with groups we've never worked with. We're trying to put their voices first, or not trying to do that. I would say we're definitely putting their voices before ours, and we're trying to act as the support of, this issue more directly impacts you. We want you to be at the forefront where the support mechanism in this, and that's kind of bridging the gap between DEI and the diversity, equity, inclusion, in the sense of here's this puffy term, diversity, equity, inclusion, actually getting in there and doing it. But now the bridge of taking that work and taking it down to the local level so that our chapters around the state can have these similar relationships with these groups. It's a little trickier because a lot of them are either just based in New York City, where they don't have upstate or out of New York City chapters, membership, or anything like that, or they're just straight up national and they don't even have members. They don't have that. So in the areas where they do have people, we're trying to bridge the gap of hey, you trust the state league, we have a local chapter here where you also have memberships and members who are doing an event. The New York Immigration Coalition has been one of our better partners with that, because they do have representation all around New York State, and New York Civil Liberties Union too, which is a group we've worked with in the past, but they are also one that has representation all over. But to sum up some of my thoughts, I'm working on that. I'm trying to figure out exactly how to bring it down, because if they don't have people in these areas of the state, how can we bring it down to that level? And that's partially why we asked our intern to look beyond these statewide and city groups and look more locally and identify different organizations locally where our local chapters are. So that's part of why we did that. And also because we just think it's important to engage groups locally. So,
and I hope all through convention, we all talk about this and think about this and, give examples to one another, because it's not in your hands alone. It's in our hands too.
Yeah.
The local level, to just keep looking and thinking about that, because it's so easy to go to the AAUW or whatever,
Yeah, absolutely. And I see Jane asked a question about losing the seat, but our population increasing, and why that would make the districts different. So I don't know the numbers off the top of my head of how many people per district our districts are going to increase by, but let's just say every district currently has 100,000 voters per district. Now, because we're losing a seat, so we have one less seat, plus we have more people, each of our districts is going to increase by, let's say, another 100,000. So we're going to have less seats, less congressional representation, but more people per seat. So every single member of the New York State delegation is going to be representing more voters than probably the Florida delegation for Congress, or some other state representation of Congress. And the reason that all the districts are going to change so much, particularly upstate, is if we have these large rural areas where one or two people live. I mean, I'm over exaggerating here. The district has to get even bigger to make sure that it has that population of, my miscellaneous number of 200,000. So the districts are going to be much, much larger than they are currently in order to fit those 200,000 voters within the district. So I hope that makes sense. If I had a pen and paper, I feel like I could draw it really well. And then Anne asked about the mapping software, and no, I don't think it matters which one. We have had educational events on Maptitude or I'm sorry, not Maptitude. We've done Representable, which is the Princeton tool. There's also District R, which is the Berkeley tool. Most of the tools are made by college students like on campus at these different universities, which is so cool. And then there's also Dave's Redistricting app, which is not a college-based one. That's an older tool that's been around a while, made by two guys named Dave. So Dave's Redistricting app is the other one. Those are the three we've mainly been focusing on. I know some other orgs are doing other tools, but those are the three free ones that are super accessible and pretty easy to use. So it doesn't matter which one. Those are just the ones we've been thinking about.
I wonder if the state, South Carolina, the league has put forth what they think fair maps should look like. And I wonder if New York State could do the same, and, so that we would have something that we're always talking about, instead of people talking here and people talking, so that this is the league's position on how the state redistricting should look.
Yeah, so we have our basic principles of what our best district should look like. And I didn't show that slide. It's on my Redistricting 101, where it's kind of like the 10 tenets of the National League wants states to follow and thinks all districts should look like. We decided at the board level for the New York State League that we would not put forward any statewide maps, either for Congress or Senate or Assembly, because the bigger priority is engaging communities in mapping. Common Cause is probably going to put forward its own maps. Brennan Center might put forward their own maps. But our concern is not hiring a map making consultant and paying a ton of money for someone to make maps for us. Our concern is every voice in New York State should matter. Every voice in New York State should be heard. And if we at the state level put forward a set of maps, and then our friends, our Buffalo League out in Buffalo is like, actually, guys, you're really not considering this immigrant population that lives right here, and your maps are bad, and it's not really considering what's there. We don't want that to happen. So if local leagues want to put forward maps, we've encouraged them, feel free to make maps for the districts that are within your district. We're also working to unite local leagues who might share certain districts, be it congressional, state senate, or assembly districts. So that way, if you're all working on the same district lines, you're all talking to each other. So we've been working on that as well. And, again, the goal of this is fair maps, but the means to the end is the most important part. And the means to the end has to be community engagement and a community forward mapping process.
The South Carolina League did not put out a map.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, they just drew, it's just one page, but what they thought, should be the rules that people should think about when they're drawing maps.
Yeah,
So,
and those are probably the national ones, I'd imagine. Actually, I probably could even pull up the
I don't
slide.
know. I think I don't know. I haven't seen a national map. A national, what would you call it?
So-
what a good map should look like. Okay. And I think it seems, they have a lot more problems than we do.
Yeah.
And I think it was pretty, that's something we could think of to do before they get started, so that we have a position and we use the power, such as it is, that we have to influence, because we, after all, are nonpartisan. And
Yeah.
I think it means a lot to people in the state.
Mm-hmm. We do have a position on redistricting, and it is so redistricting for the most part is a national led initiative. And here, I'll put up the slide of what national tells us to focus on, which I think is actually what they have is really good recommendations. So this is like the national You know, it's gonna make me skip ahead. Sorry. These are the ones that national tells all local and state chapters to focus on, the sort of like basic.
Mhm.
And we probably will do, I'll take it down so we can all look at each other. We probably will do for our public hearings, have sort of a pre-put together intro for local leagues to use if they want to testify at these different hearings. That'll include those different things. So great point, great comment. Anybody else, any final thoughts or share out?
Well, I put in the chat about reminding people the congressional lines last time were not gerrymandered because they were done by the courts. So I think we need to really watch what now that one party is in control, what happens.
Well, Tompkins County, we have 3 different representatives to the state Senate. Okay. We have been so badly gerrymandered, it isn't even funny. And as far as the congressional map, we have very little in common with the rest of our congressional map. We just are not part of that whole area, except for some of the agricultural.
But aren't you like a dense population within a very rural area? So it's sort of understandable that they pull some of that density apart.
Oh, no.
There's somebody address that.
No, but all of our relationships with our surrounding areas are much different. I mean, we might have much more in common with other educational institutions. And our district goes kind of, it's hard to even explain. But it wasn't much better before because it went the same way in the opposite direction. So, but, I mean, we are clearly a group that needs some more representation than we have. We're not very large, but we're all divided into 3. We used to be just 1.
So I saw someone in the chat was asking about local redistricting, and depending on where you live, some counties have at large seats, some towns have at large seats, so they won't do redistricting. But I put a link in the chat to the New York Law School's resource on how every single locality, town, city, county in New York State does redistricting. So if you're kind of interested to see, the link is in the chat, and we have that on our redistricting page as well. Great, so we're at about 6:45 now, and I know I'm anxious to have a break before the next 11 hours. So if there's no more burning questions or anything, I'll just quickly throw in the chat to my email address in case anyone is interested in like talking more about redistricting or has questions or anything like that. Just Jennifer at LW. Oh, Barbara, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that if you have a highly dense area, as they do in Tompkins County, or we have in our own township, if you tear it apart, their community of interest is shattered. So that's why when you have a dense area, you do not tear it apart, because then they have absolutely no voice.
Yes, we have.
And in our township is all chopped up in the town of Luray. It's the highly dense area. It's all chopped up, and really we have very little voice. And so that's the problem with chopping up a highly dense area. Yes, a highly dense area, you have a lot of times a more balance between Republicans and Democrats. But the Democrats in that area, if you chop them all up, that's very effective for the Republicans, but not for the Democrats.
In Ulster County, we
But
looked, everybody said Kingston had different interests from all the rest of them. So we gave Kingston three people and gave, set their own districts, and the other towns had different people. So we understood that. But I was thinking, well, I was trying to think why they would have done that, because that was the courts. It was not political.
that's why it has to be done on a different, you have to look at other things.
Right.
What does an area have in common with other places that are in the surrounding area? And we are Cornell, we have, there's a bus that goes to New York City, for example. So we have much more in common with downstate than we do with the western part of New York State.
Yeah.
But that's sort of where we are in terms of the congressional map. I mean, it's not clear that if we were all in one as we were before. I think we didn't have a lot of, we're just a small place with mostly Democrats, and we're surrounded, or had been surrounded more in the past with Republican areas. We didn't have a lot of voice, but at least it'd be nice to have us in one place so that we would have a little bit more of a voice rather than divide us up this way.
Barbara, you can go ahead.
Like for instance, just different infrastructure concerns in a dense area. Out in the rural areas, they're not worried about sewage and water and all that other stuff, where densely populated areas are. So, it's just infrastructure. If you're all chopped up, who's going to speak about your infrastructure needs? So that's, there is a lot to think about.
And I think those are the things we should be thinking about rather than trying to divide things up with respect to the political parties. That's why I really think the political parties should not be involved in this at all. But they are. I mean, even in South Carolina, they are. But I'm told that the league has a little more confidence in the particular Republicans that are on the committee. So, they're a little bit happier about it, but they don't like that either there, of course. But there it's much harder to get anything that would look like no political parties involved.
I'll just make one quick comment because I know you want to break, but we went to all the towns in Ulster County and said, whom do you have relationships with? And that's when they all said, just don't put us with Kingston because they have different issues, just as you're pointing out. And so that's why we did what we did and give Kingston 3 people, and then everybody else got different people. But I think there is a problem with that as I'm hearing you talk. So that's interesting.
Barbara, you go ahead.
One of the things in St. Lawrence, I'm in Jefferson County, but St. Lawrence County is our league. And one of the concerns there is that in their Potsdam-Canton area, they have many universities and colleges, and yet they're all chopped up, both in the Assembly and in the Senate. And so the colleges don't have an opportunity to address the needs that are common among the college. They don't have one person to represent them. So that's another way, not only infrastructure, but education, the different industries in the area.
That's right. Yeah, those are the things we should be looking at. And I'm afraid that if I'm afraid we might not get to an independent map that is going to be good, but we'll work toward it. I think that's what we have to do. We have to think very carefully about it because there are a lot of issues. There, as soon as there are people who, have very little voice, then they feel that they're left out and so on. And the whole idea, it seems to me that the league is what's the important part of this. What has to happen is that people who don't have a voice, because there just aren't enough of them, okay? They have to get together and begin working toward putting candidates up. Even if you lose, I mean, at least you have a voice, you're doing something. And what you do is you have a cake sale, you have a garage sale, and you put people up. And then you go out and you campaign. I mean, that's all you really can do if there are very few of you. But the league is helpful in helping people understand who they're voting for so that they can vote for people who will let everybody have a voice without shutting people out, even if they don't agree with them, because that's how we get things done. That's called democracy. And it's how things change for the better.
On that note, thanks
Yeah.
everyone for being on. And this is the first of many conversations. Actually, give me a great idea of maybe doing a roundtable conversation with rural leagues talking to more urban or suburban leagues about redistricting. But for now, I will leave you all. So I will see you all at the next breakout sessions. And thanks everybody for being on. And special thanks to Michelle for being my co-host tonight.
Thanks,
Thank you for
Jennifer.
doing that.
Thanks everybody.